All right, can you hear me? Hello,
Huh.
can you hear me?
hmm
Okay, perfect. Okay. Good afternoon, Coach Lloyd.
Good afternoon.
I'm Anya McSorley, and I'm the new sports psychologist for the athletic department.
It's a pleasure to finally meet you.
It's nice to meet you as well. I wanted to thank you again for scheduling this meeting with me to discuss the benefits of sports psychology in the college level sports.
Yes, of course. I wanted to meet with you as soon as possible and get a better understanding to exactly what you're looking to do.
Well, I'm excited for the opportunity to work with you and your football team. And after our previous phone calls and emails, I've gotten myself familiar with the IUP football team's history. It seems that you have an outstanding record, Coach.
Why, thank you. Our boys work hard to maintain a specific level of greatness each year.
Well, behind a great team is an even greater coach. I'm really looking forward to exploring more of your values and philosophies as the head coach throughout this conversation. And I know as we speak briefly, it is my understanding you haven't had much experience with a sports psychologist.
I've had a few experiences as head coach. Our previous sports psychologist did more athletic department group work rather than individual team settings.
Was group setting intervention something you liked, or is there more you wish would have occurred throughout your experiences with sports psychology?
Well, as a former college football player and now head coach of a Division II program, I believe mentality plays a role in your performance. But with the previous experience I've had with sports psychology, I just feel like it wasn't as effective as I hoped for.
I agree with you. Mentality does play a role in performance, and some sports psychology experiences may not be as effective or translate the way we hope for, just as some coaching styles don't always work for the same athletes.
Exactly. So, what do you have planned that will be different from the last sports psychologist we encountered?
Well, my goals for today are to help gain a better understanding of your background with the sport and what your coaching style obtains, and to explore any previous challenges or issues you may have encountered with sports psychology so that I can present new ideas or methods that may be more effective. After achieving this, my purpose is to be able to provide you with a better understanding of exactly what my methods in sports psychology look like and answer any questions you may have. I would also like to discover where my skills and abilities can be applied towards your team to help enhance performance.
So, what exactly is your title and what can you do with that?
So, I am a sports psychologist and I also have my certification in mental performance consulting.
How does being a sports psychologist differ from our previous clinical psychologists?
A lot of people hear the term applied sports psychology, which entails a lot of educational background. Therefore, my emphasis or expertise lies in the social and cognitive behavioral orientations. I focus on how behavior is determined through environment and cognitions or thoughts, or how behavior is determined through interactions between a person and their social environment.
Okay, I see.
I also have an extensive amount of training in sports science and psychology. So I'm able to coach, or in other words, teach athletes mental skills rather than how you teach physical and mental experiences and implement them each day. So I can work with groups and workshops, or I can also work with individuals one on one and help teach the development of psychological skills. I just cannot work with clinical issues such as diagnosing clinical depression, anxiety disorders, and more serious cases.
And what psychological skills do you implement?
I tend to focus on three skill sets as an applied sports psychologist, and these include performance enhancement skills or interventions, which is actually a concentration of mine.
Why is that something you focus on?
Well, I concentrate on performance enhancement interventions because this can improve the well being of the athlete in more cases that I've seen. Let me give you an example. So, let's say one of your players is having a really hard time focusing on catching the ball. I work with the athlete one on one and use attentional training to help him ignore the defense or the fans or sidelines and simply focus on that one goal, catching the ball, which he knows how to already do. He may just need some extra guidance to get there.
What specific guidance would you be able to provide?
I would use, for example, the stress inoculation training with this specific athlete. This training helps prepare the athlete in advance to handle any stressful event successfully, and that stressful event being catching the ball.
That sounds like a good strategy. What other methods would you use?
I also implement social psychological skills that use theory or research for more group processes or workshops. So this can include working with a specific group.
That sounds like something we could use. Our special teams unit isn't clicking as much as I'd like. How would you help them rebuild their rapport?
By working with a smaller group, I can help each athlete obtain skills for awareness and self monitoring. To get to that point, there would be a lot of open discussion with their peers so they can be held accountable and also grow social support outlets within their special teams groups. My role in the group discussion would be to simply guide them or give topics when the group runs out of ideas. And lastly, I also focus on health and exercise and how the psychological factors play a role in the exercise, or for this case, in the sport.
What type of things will they be learning in these workshops?
A big thing we talk about is coping mechanisms with stress and how athletes have all of these stressors or pressures that are not only related to sport, but could be from academic or social support, family, etc. I can build interventions that work on specific coping techniques to help these athletes cope with those stressors and help them balance them out. So, for example, some of the techniques could include imagery workshops or a muscle relaxation lesson that they could run themselves through before practice, or even a self talk workshop.
That's excellent.
If you don't mind me asking, what is your coaching philosophy and how do you approach the game?
I want to make sure my players have access to whatever they need so that they can reach their full potential and grow as men. How do I approach the game? It's a game. It allows young men to blossom and grow into successful adults and face adversities that will prepare them for life. In life, you have to be ahead in order to be afloat.
I'm glad you brought up being ahead of the game because I too believe in more of a proactive approach to sport. It sounds to be that you are very aware of how fast the sport is changing and how to stay on top of playbook switches and more.
You mentioned proactive approach. Can you elaborate on that?
Well, I like to view the proactive approach to sports psychology as building off of self confidence or self motivation, not fixing something. So I'm here to help bring new information or skills and support to enhance or improve the performance, whether that is for you as a coach or for your athletes. I'm not coming in here to fix something when it's not broken. The hope is it doesn't break. We work as a team to make our players mentally and physically strong and ahead of the next roadblock. If you don't mind me asking, what pressures do you see yourself and your team facing most this season?
I want to keep with some of our goals from last season. But with the young guys stepping up, it's important for them to create their own identity.
Well, I know this goal setting system I learned in my master's program, which I really liked. There are some basic principles I use, and there are lots of different ways to implement the system, but this way I find really effective. Would you like to hear more?
Yes, please.
So, in a lot of my workshops or interventions, I like to implement the theory of three. As for coaches, we know repetition is key for our athletes to remember and be successful. Like, do you ever find yourself saying, hustle, 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 or things like, we gotta go, we gotta go, we gotta go, three times in a row?
Wow, I do that. I never think I realized I must have been doing it subconsciously.
Exactly. So things are easily remembered when it comes in threes. For my goal setting system, I have three objectives. This is for daily practices and long term settings. We'll start with step one. At the beginning of a practice, we can discuss a daily objective we wish to accomplish or focus on. For example, our goal is to get off the line quicker. We would state the objective so it is in our athlete's mind and then give them three cue words to bring them back to focus during practice. So do you have any cue words maybe in mind?
During the drills, we could use eyes up, drive, and power. And to get everyone focused throughout practice, we could say, get your mind right.
Yes, that's perfect. Eyes up, drive, power. That can be what they repeat to themselves or what you can shout right before drills so they focus on that daily goal, getting off the line quicker. So in step two, that's where we help the athlete become more self reliant and fully apply the goal setting process. And let me remind you, just as in coaching, sports psychology takes patience too. We might be on step one for a few practices before we can allow our athletes to fully become reliant, self reliant, and aware.
That makes sense. So what happens when we get to step two?
In step two, we will encourage the players to plan their daily objective. With two strategies to achieve that objective, they will write it down and also write down how they want it to be evaluated. So, our athlete decides he wants to get into better shape. How could he do that?
Probably run more.
Yes, run more. He could run before or after practice, and he could also run between drills for quick bursts of conditioning. One way we like to implement this method is through peer groups. So each group, tight ends, wide receivers, running backs, could all discuss with a partner their daily objective, how they want to measure it, and how they want to be evaluated. And their partner can hold them accountable.
Sounds cool. That ties in with group cohesion too, doesn't it?
Yeah, exactly. That will help bring each group closer to one another because they will not only have an accountability partner, but also support from one another to accomplish their goals.
Okay, I'm starting to see the bigger picture.
Lastly, step three is to get more in depth understanding and practice with these athletes to set up our short, our long, and our daily goals. It's important to emphasize how these goals are individualized, specific, they're measurable, they should be challenging, but they should be achievable for each athlete. So we can interchange words like short term goals for what's our small goals today, our long term goals for what's your big goal for the season, and our daily or everyday goals, whether that's waking up 30 minutes before practice or running 30 minutes before practice.
Okay, cool. So, how do you imagine getting every football player on the team to buy into this?
That's a great question. As a sports psychologist, the kinds of principles and methods we deal with apply to absolutely everything about how we perform and what we do. Like I said earlier, as an athlete and a coach, you and your team are the expert in this sport. I'm just another tool to utilize to sharpen your game.
I'm following.
So, mental and emotional capacities are often the limiting factors in athletic performance, especially when it's crunch time or a high stress situation like a championship game. My goal would be to work with the team as a whole first and foremost. During these meetings, I would want nothing more than for you to join in and tell your stories along with the interventions I'm giving. It's been recognized that psychological benefits do arise from sport, but they don't automatically result from the involvement. So that's where utilizing me as a sports psychologist is just like utilizing your strength coach to become stronger or faster physically.
Awesome. I'm really counting on that.
I believe if I can start out working with the team as a group and getting to know your players and you and your staff, that I can bring a lot of effective techniques to the table. Athletes can be educationally equipped with tools to self motivate. And I'm not here to tell them what to do necessarily. I'm more of a guide to help them formulate and regulate their thoughts and their goals so that they can perform and have a purpose to every training or practice.
I think group work with the whole team will benefit, but I do want to break into smaller groups and have you work with the athletes on a more personal level if you could.
I would love that. As a mental performance consultant and sports psychologist, I am most competent in educational workshops and performance enhancement interventions. Working with athletes in a group setting is appropriate as long as we worked out a verbal or written informed consent form, and I can write that up for us after the meeting or in our next meeting. As with you, I would also want your athletes to want to buy into the sports psychology workshops. I do not think it's beneficial or ethical to force any of them to have to come to the meetings. But if you show your support and encouragement, hopefully the athletes will want to follow.
I agree. Gaining the trust of these players is going to have to be your top priority. What can I do to help support you?
I want to be involved in your plan, your philosophy, your values, and morals as a team. And if I were to work with your team, I want to implement effective strategies where they fit, not force anything. If we hold workshops or interventions with the team, I think it would be wonderful if you were in attendance in those meetings and also if you were involved somehow, whether you have a story that goes along with an intervention that I bring up or any of that. I think your voice and opinion matters to your athletes a lot.
I can do that.
Awesome. While we're on the subject of meeting with the athletes in groups, if an athlete were to meet with me individually one on one, that is typically when our relationship may change. So, when I meet with an athlete individually, the main concern for me is confidentiality. The athlete may open up about their personal world or a personal problem. Therefore, I'm obligated to keep those conversations between me and the athlete. Is that something that you're comfortable with?
Oh, yes, of course.
Great. I do believe that it is important for staff to be involved in our athletes' development. So I will encourage athletes to discuss things with the coaching staff or, for example, the nutritionist or conditioning coach if the situation comes up, but I cannot force them to discuss any information, and I cannot discuss any information if they choose not to go and talk to you. In these instances, when they do open up to me about their personal role, I'm not necessarily talking to your athlete anymore. I'm more talking to the athlete as an individual. So it does change the orientation just a little, but please know that my intention is for the best of the athlete. And when it's for the best of the athlete, it will benefit the team.
I understand. As long as they're getting the treatment they need.
Of course. Again, my goal is to create an environment that is safe. And I actually encourage the athlete to get in touch with as many staff members as they can. I think having a good multidisciplinary team built around an athlete who specifically is struggling creates a wonderful support system and can really help athletes develop. If an athlete does come to me with a more serious clinical issue, for example, a clinical anxiety disorder or a depressive disorder or an eating disorder, as of right now, my degree and certification is not in that realm of competence. So, any clinical cases, I will have to refer them to someone who is licensed and competent in that area. Do you have any questions about that specifically?
So, what will you be able to help with then besides clinical cases?
So, fortunately, the university has a wonderful clinical counselor in the psychological services and counseling center on campus. So, if I ever encounter a clinical issue with one of our athletes that is outside of my scope of practice, I know who they're being referred to and how competent that person is in their specialty. As for me, I have the training and certifications to help athletes' psychological skills and methods that focus on improving performance for their sport. So, although I cannot work with an athlete who wants to discuss, let's say, medications for clinical anxiety, I can work with an athlete who experiences anxiety prior to a run test or pre competition anxiety. So I have the tools such as muscle relaxation or breathing techniques for those athletes who need that self regulation for their body and their mind.
That all sounds good. Real quick, going back to goal setting. How do you know that method is effective? I think I want to buy in. I just struggle because of my last experience.
I completely understand. So I use this goal setting system for my daily life as well. So earlier we discussed short term, long term, and daily goals, or in other words, big, small, and daily goals. I graduated in August with my master's degree in sports psychology. And prior to graduation, I was in a course from May to August that was helping me obtain my hours to become eligible to get the certification that I now have. So my long term goal was to get certified in August. So in hindsight, that was always the big goal. I'm going to get my certification once I graduate. My short term goal was to get the 33 to 35 hours per week for those 3 months. So from May to August, I had to get 33 hours per week. So every week I'd go in and check it off if I got it. And then my daily goal was to get 2 hours per day of logged hours. So whatever I did during the day, I had to get 2 hours that specifically worked towards getting that certification. After assessing the long, short, and daily goals, I was able to hold myself accountable and watch my progress over those 3 months, which allowed me to stay motivated and also have those little celebrations along the way. So each week, when I got those 33 hours, I saw myself getting closer to that big, big goal.
I'm going to utilize you with this system. I do have another meeting shortly, but I would love to continue this conversation sometime in the near future.
That sounds wonderful. Would you like to have lunch on Wednesday around, let's say, 12:30? We can discuss more of your values for the team and start to interpret why we're choosing some of the goals we're choosing for this upcoming season.
12:30 works for me. I would like my assistant coaches there as well to see if they have any questions I may have missed.
That's perfect. I look forward to the lunch with you and your colleagues, and I hope you have a great rest of your day.
It's been a pleasure. Take care.
You too. Bye bye.